The only threat that's bigger than tonight's breaking story is thermonuclear war. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
I didn't realize after that cold open that we're going to talk about Taylor Swift's new album today. The only threat greater than nuclear war?
You can't bring me down. Not today. Listen, he knew that would throw me off. We cannot do that because we have so much to get to tonight, because we're going to talk about a huge breaking, developing story. So we need to just go out there and forget about the spy balloons. China has built a sim farm army on our soil. There's a new article right now at theblaze.com that shows that China is running a massive sim farm network that's inside the United States, and it's threatening to cripple our cell towers and internet service. But this isn't cybercrime. It's digital warfare, and it's a direct threat to the critical infrastructure in our country. And it's been going on for a long time, but the Secret Service only recently figured this out. Blaze News investigative journalists Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman wrote this story exclusively, and Steve is here with more right now. So, Steve, thanks for joining us, because when we first learned of these sim farms about a week or so ago, when the world leaders were gathered at the UN, the Secret Service found a network that could essentially shut down the cellular network in New York City. But what you and Joe Hanneman exposed is that China is running these sim farms all across the country. So first, let's start with explaining what the real threat here is.
The real threat is that these sim farms, and this is the national security threat, is that these sim farms can shut down tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of cell phones and the internet connections as well in the areas where these sim farms are set up. For instance, this last bust that we heard about last week, we heard about one there in New York City. There was actually 5 there in the tri-state area around New York City that HSI and Secret Service and other agencies took down with tactical units, SWAT raids, so to speak. They kicked down doors. There was nobody there. They don't need to be manned. They're run by remote control. They're run and spoken to by the computers in China and also other parts of the world. And so the threat is that if they decided to execute a command to take down the cell network and the internet network in New York City, we're talking about escape from New York City level chaos that would happen. We're talking about the disruption of all the supply chains. You would not be able to buy gasoline except by paying cash, but nobody carries cash anymore. And then when you go to the ATM, you can't access the ATM. So within a day or two, nobody's going to have any gasoline because of the supply chain system now, because of the way it's developed. Grocery stores will be empty in 3 days. And then you have looting will begin immediately, and it will create it almost takes us back to the dark ages when that happens, because we are so dependent upon the internet and upon the cellular networks today.
Steve, I want to go back in time a little bit and just 2024, last year, Politico came out with a couple articles on the Chinese and what they were doing here in America. If we go to full screen 6 there, and look at this old article. I mean, there was a time when people realized Chinese hackers were geolocating millions of Americans and recording phone calls, right? And this kind of came and went last year. And in full screen 7, you also had Chinese hackers gaining access to Americans' cell records. And then, of course, recently, full screen 2, as we just described, in New York, the Secret Service finds this sim farm. We're going to go into more about what that means, but explain the exclusive part of this story here and how this actually happened, how this was revealed.
Well, it was revealed by virtue of the fact that there was this rash of swatting that took place to conservative influencers, Congress members, members of the administration that happened this past spring. And of course, the FBI, Kash Patel, rightfully came out and said, we're looking into this and we're going to figure out what's behind this, because these are attempted murders, by the way. The reason why these individuals, whoever they are, call in swatting on anybody is so that the tactical units from the local sheriffs, police department, state police, whatever it is, they come in hard. They've got guns up. They're all in their, their tactical gear, and they have been told that somebody in that house is being held hostage, that somebody has been killed, maybe that three family members have been shot to death by the father of whoever owns the home. And so when these tactical units come in, they come in hard and hot. And if they surprise somebody in the middle of the night or early in the morning that has no idea they're showing up, and they roll out of bed, grab their perfectly legal, Second Amendment protected firearm to protect themselves, then they can be killed. And this has happened in this country on numerous occasions in these SWAT raids. Now, some of these SWAT raids are legitimate, and this happens. Some, as these that we're talking about here, are not legitimate. And then they're typically accompanied by other threats, and then they're followed up to almost like to add insult to injury. To the same addresses, they'll start getting dozens of unexplained pizza orders or food deliveries to their house, just to say, we can do that again if we want to.
We look at what is going on with these SWAT raids, and in the article you guys name, it's a senior Secret Service official, Kash Patel, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tim Pool, Steve Bannon, just to name a few of the people that have actually been swatted. But when we look at the threat as a whole with these SIM farms, this isn't something that just started, right? In your article, it says this began as early as 2004. That's not 2024. That's not a misspeak. That was 2004 is what you reported in this article. So I would assume that obviously if these are the senior level people that we have already named, this has to be very difficult to find these SIM farms.
Well, it is, because there's so many layers of security built into these SIM farms, and just the very nature of them is they're rerouting and redirecting calls from all over the world in order to execute these types. That's what makes it so hard to track these. Now, this is the biggest point we want to make, and I'm going to go back to Matt's question a moment ago. What was the exclusive part of this? What Blaze learned is that this recent set of 5 interdictions, or where they actually went in and raided these SIM farms in the New York City area, was precipitated because a very high-ranking member of the United States Secret Service was SWAT raided in his home, middle of the morning, middle of the night, can't remember which one it was. And as a result of that, suddenly it was important. So it wasn't important enough for Marjorie Taylor Greene for them to execute a real aggressive electronic and technological search into finding these things, until, there's no other way to say it, until the right person got swatted. And I guess Tim Pool being swatted like 16 times is not enough, but it took only one swatting incident with this particular individual for that to launch this really high-tech investigation. So what they did is they brought in a couple of senior analysts and very talented, very smart, almost savant level analysts to find this. And they did, and they located what the problem was, and then what they have to do, so they know the area that these phone calls are coming from. And then once they have that located, then they go in with these systems that are designed specifically to look for a high concentrated amount of this type of communication from one spot, like one room, one in industrial area, or one office building, or office park, or something like that. And then they were able to find these, and then they put together the strategy for taking them down and taking them out. It just so happened by coincidence that they took this one out in New York City. It seemed to have been associated with the UN assembly that week. It really wasn't, and even the Secret Service, their spokesperson, the senior agent in charge over this operation, seemed to indicate that this was something that they executed to protect the visitors from all over the world, including the president was there to keep them safe. And it's certainly that did happen, because we don't want those things to happen when you have so many dignitaries in one single location. But it really was an ongoing operation that began quite a few months ago.
I mean, this is unbelievable because what you're saying is we all remember the swatting. It occurred, there was a rash of them, as you say. We had Nick Sorter and others on the show to talk about this. His family was targeted. A number of people were targeted. But what happened here was this threat has been here, and we're going to talk more and more what that threat is and the extent of it, has been here for decades, basically. And we just discovered it because a Secret Service official was targeted. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden, the big dog has gotten to play, and they found this SIM farm. Tell us more about what this means. I mean, most people know the SIM card on their phone. They understand what that is. Tell us more about what a SIM farm is.
Well, what these are, these actual machines, and the one thing that, my eyes will glaze over when I start looking at the technology, because that's not my field of expertise at all, but you can see from the images here that there are dozens and dozens of these machines that also have dozens and dozens of cellular modems in each machine, and then each of those machines have up to 500 SIM cards for each one of these cellular modems. And as a result of that, one farm like this can have hundreds of thousands of the active ability to do all kinds of things that we see on our phones all the time. We get messages on our phone all the time that are random, that are spam, or they're phishing expeditions. We get emails like that. These are the types of things that are being executed from these SIM farms like that. Now, they're not always run by China. They're sometimes run by criminal organizations, and sometimes just by individuals that have a little scam going, and they're trying to fish for people's banking information. And we always think that they're coming out of Russia or China or Iran or even North Korea. And in fact, they do have similar operations, but China is the expert at this. And it is estimated now that by the intelligence sources that we've spoken to, that they're looking at anywhere from 60 to 100 possible sites in the United States. Most of these will be in or near major cities, border towns specifically. And then the point of that is so that they can emulate the actual phone numbers in the area. And that's why so many times when we get a call, they've spoofed what they call spoofing, and you look up the phone number. We had this incident actually happen, believe it or not, in our own investigation into Corey Mills. There was spoofed numbers being used at times that we couldn't track down, and we, falsely or rightfully, we might have made the assumption that they were coming from somebody that we were looking at or investigating, but the likelihood is that they were just anonymously spoofed from one of these locations or a similar type of operation. And when you trace the number, it goes back to somebody completely different. One of these numbers that we tracked down was an actual book publisher. They had spoofed the landline of a large book publisher in Washington, D.C. And that's what they're able to do. And that's what creates such confusion in this. And it makes it very difficult to track them down for law enforcement, for the FBI and other agencies, whether it's HSI, Secret Service, or whoever.
The enormity of this is just, it's sort of soul crushing. You had one that they got rid of in New York City that could have shut down all kinds of critical infrastructure and was responsible for all kinds of wrongdoing. And you have 60, 80, 100 is the estimate in this article. That's absolutely astounding and terrifying. When you look at how these actually operate, if we go back to the swatting, does this mean that the Chinese were behind the swatting, or that they were providing the infrastructure from which the swatting occurred?
The correct answer, as best we're able to understand it from our sources, is that there's not some Chinese individual sitting in some Chinese town that's actually making these calls. What they do is they provide access to their SIM farms to criminal organizations, to other governments, and then also to, unfortunately, let's just say maybe possibly more nefarious actors within our own government.
Well, let's get into the acts of war when we come back. We're getting there. Share the Arrows is next weekend. So, ladies, listen up. It's hosted by Blaze TV's Allie Beth Stuckey, and you need to get your tickets right now if you haven't already, because last year was incredible, and this year is going to be even better. You're going to hear from the boldest, most steadfast Christian voices of our day, and you'll leave feeling fully equipped to tackle the lies and obstacle that this world throws at us. So, you need to be there. The event is going on to happen here in Dallas, October 11th. You can get all the details and tickets at sharethearrows.com. That's sharethearrows.com. Steve, the acts of war, you wrote it in the article. This is incredibly serious. When we're talking about these sim farms, Steve, it's one of those things that people, if they don't know what it is really hard to wrap your brain around. But tell everybody just how serious government officials are talking about this, the language that they're using.
It's very serious. It is, in fact, legitimately and legally a defined act of war to be doing what they're doing, to even be executing on system disruptions like that. And of course, now the Trump administration has defined this swatting activity as an act of terrorism. Both are completely accurate. The goal is to create disruption, confusion, chaos, and if in fact the Chinese or any other nefarious government or bad actor or enemy of the United States were to actually quote, pull the trigger here and unleash a full assault, then that would have the crippling effect of not only bringing down the infrastructure in every city, as I had mentioned earlier, but it also affects our military tremendously, because now our military is almost 100% dependent upon cellular systems and the internet, and that's for all of their systems. And then you get into the transportation. Let's just say we were invaded and we needed to transport tanks and armored vehicles to a certain part of the country where an assault was launched against us. Then the trains are not going to run either because they're dependent upon the internet. And so this is, we feel like a test run. It's poking, it's prodding, it's seeing what our capabilities are to identify, and then maybe the enemy's reaction will be just to, at this point, harden their facilities. And by harden them, I don't mean build concrete around them. I'm talking about harden them electronically and make them more difficult to find with other layers of rerouting and that sort of thing. But because this has happened, and because it's now in the news, and because they have taken out 5 of these facilities, it's very logical that the Chinese are making an assessment right now. We're talking about their intelligence services or their military, and they're saying, okay, is it go time? Since they know about it and we need to go now before they take out all of these facilities, or do we just need to step back, reassess, and we can just pray and hope that the Chinese generals are saying no, we're not ready yet. But there's also a concern, and this is something big that I was told during these discussions, is that there is an active plan right now that the intelligence community knows about to actually take Taiwan back, China to take Taiwan back by 2027. And these are the kinds of things that they can test here and see what kind of disruptions are possible before they execute a full plan over there.
So tell me that we are now fully engaged, the government, in rooting all of these out. I assume that now that this has been exposed, we are going to take action immediately?
You might understand, and we would hope that our audience will understand, that there are things that we know that we have to be very careful about talking about. Not only do we, the Blaze, as a news organization, want to protect national security as well, but there are individuals who are very, very concerned that want to come forward and want to talk to us about this. And they're taking a great risk as well, not only with their job, with their own, their own livelihood, their own income, the possibility of losing their security clearances, things of that nature, by even talking to us. And also talking, we're not the only news service that they're talking to. I just, read an article today that was put out by ABC where they actually corroborated our story about the Chinese being involved and behind these SIM farms. And so it's nice to have some, corroboration from the MSM, but they also did not release certain amount of information that we also know about. And I kind of got the feeling from reading the ABC article, for instance, that they too were asked to pull back. And let me explain what I mean by that. I did our normal routine when we're preparing a story. And when you name all of these agencies in a story, for instance, Department of Homeland Security, HSI, that's Homeland Security Investigations, United States Secret Service, et cetera, it's incumbent upon us to go to them for comment before we put the stories out. And I went to the Secret Service with a list of 5 questions. Some of that 5 were actually multi-part questions. I asked for comment. I asked for validation, verification about what we were being told. And I was stunned at how fast they responded. Within minutes, I got my first call, and that was from their public affairs office. And they were concerned about a couple of pieces of information that we had in our story and intended on using. And so in my first conversation, I was very insistent that one of those was real news, and it wasn't going to be able to be stifled and held back for very long anyway. And so that we intended to go with that. I agreed, not reluctantly, but I agreed that we would withhold one other piece. And they were asking about this for, the operational security is the reason that they're asking for this. And so I agreed to that. And then within another 10 minutes, I get another phone call from DC, another DC area code, and they had escalated that to a higher ranking position within the Secret Service. And they asked me and explained why, that they would like to have us withhold another segment of this story for the time being. And so I considered that, and then we negotiated a rewording of the way we were putting this out there so that it would not affect national security. And it did. I don't think it infected or affected the impact of our story or our article either. And so I felt like that was something that we could do. And I even told them, I said, look, we're just as concerned for your guys that are making these raids. We're just as concerned about our national security. And so for the time being, we will certainly hold off on some of this. So to answer your question, there are certain questions like that I really hesitate to move forward on with too much explicit detail. And I will tell you, we know a lot more than we're talking about right now, and that will be coming out in subsequent stories that Joe and I are working on. We're already working on part 2, and I'm sure there will probably be a couple of other segments as well.
Yeah, before we get to any of the part 2 stuff, we do know one thing, that Joe Biden had the border wide open down at our southern border. And we know that the Chinese have been embedded in the United States for quite some time. If we could put up full screen 9, you can see here, these are the Chinese that have come into the United States as of April of 2024. Over 24,000 Chinese crossed the southern border illegally. That's up 88,500% from March of 2021. So those numbers right there, you can see that as a new election was about to take place, Steve, those numbers skyrocketed. So if there is any plan, right, and it doesn't even have to be this plan that we're talking about, but when I look at those numbers, Steve, that's very concerning to me.
Well, it's not just this number. I mean, I feel like that was an open invasion, and unfortunately, and there's no other way to say it, it was an open invitation to invasion by the Biden administration. But even more troubling are the hundreds of thousands of students that we have come, because we know, again, through intelligence sources, this is not hidden. And by the way, this is not anything that I'm breaking new right here. There are books written about this. There are college courses taught about this. We talk about this. I don't know if we got into this completely in the article, but we quote a former NSA analyst and also was a FBI analyst, counterintelligence, et cetera, who taught a college course for 10 years. And one of his actual courses during that time was teaching exactly what we're seeing now with the identification and realization of these sim farms being built around the country. And what he said to me, he said, he told me when we interviewed him yesterday, he said, "Thanks, Steve." He said, "You've ruined my day." And I said, "Really? Why is that?" And he said, "Because," he said, "back then I was teaching about this as a possibility. Now you're revealing that it is here."
Yeah, it is here. I mean, so let's just sum up real quick. We have the exclusive is that the swattings that occurred last year is what led to the investigation that revealed the existence of these sim farms and that China is behind them and sort of renting them out or using them for their own purposes and renting them out to nefarious actors. I think that's clear enough. But what they can be used for, as you describe it, there's two different things, and I want to tee up the second part of this so that you can let people know what they're going to be able to read at the Blaze Monday or Tuesday this next week. The first though is critical infrastructure, which you talk about in this article. And I don't know about anyone in the audience, but if you've been paying attention, there's a lot of chatter from well-informed people about what has been going on in the United States when it comes to, weird fires happening at factories, airports shutting down for a few hours when they seem to be under some kind of electronic attack. There's a lot of this sort of thing happening, and people are talking about it behind the scenes and in public. And this is the kind of thing, right, that could be related to critical infrastructure being threatened by the sim farms. So that's, physical stuff. But there's another side to this that I know you and Joe are working on, and that's the spiritual or the psychological warfare that can be waged using these sim farms.
Yeah, that is a very frightening thing. That's going to be the focus of part two of our story about these sim farms, is the influence operation of the Chinese over the hearts and minds of American citizens. Now, just as a for instance, we saw something unfortunate that affected us all very deeply 3 weeks ago with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We've subsequently learned that he was a part of this group of, we'll just call them gender disaffected or gender confused individuals that were part of a Discord channel. Well, what we are going to be revealing in this part two of our series here is how much of an effect that has and how deeply involved the Chinese are through these sim farms in those operations. And let me just give you an example of what they're able to do. One of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that these farms are not just based somewhere overseas and based in large cities is because they have to go through the spoofing operation. And what I mean by that is, when you sign up for like Facebook or any of the other meta products like Instagram or Threads you go through what they call a multi-factor identification process. You submit your home address, your phone number, your sometimes your driver's license to authenticate who you are with these sites. Same thing with X. And yet what these farms are able to do is actually replicate that using AI and the commands coming from China into those systems, and they can replicate that. And that's why they're able to create hundreds of millions of fake accounts on these social media sites. Now, one of the best things that Elon ever did was requiring an $8 a month subscription to X to get your blue check mark, because in so doing, it makes it cost prohibitive because even the Chinese are not going to pay for tens of millions of fake users at $8 a month, and so therefore X is the safest right now of all of these. Meta is a disaster. Discord is probably the worst. But we are told, this is a quote that I got from somebody in the community. It says the entire intelligence community knows that up to 80% of all Reddit users are fake, and there's no way you can tell because they are interacting with young people, gamers, user groups of all types, of all manner of subjects, and they're proliferating a progressive message out there. And you can pick which one of those progressive slices you want, whether it's getting on a board with people that are gender confused, and a girl that feels she's a tomboy at 7 or 8 years old, and she feels like maybe because she's seen it on television or she watched a video on Netflix, now we know, and she thinks, well, maybe I'm a boy. And then she will go onto these user groups and learn from there exactly what China wants her to think, because the purpose is chaos, confusion, discord, and disruption. And that's what they're trying to do, is disrupt our society. But when you're doing it by the hundreds of millions, it is having an impact and an effect. And I hate to say, and I hate to reveal to everybody, because we get in trouble for talking about certain things, but it also can affect our elections, because all of those modems and all of those tabulators in those voting machines have modems in them.
That is
And they can be accessed as well, and they can be spoofed, they can be hijacked, just like your bank account can be hijacked, just like your Facebook account can be hijacked. And unfortunately, and I'll say one more thing about this, because I don't want to give it all away in the story. But when we talk about these fake users online, they play the long game. So they don't immediately come out of the blocks and suddenly reveal that they're trying to sow confusion or discord. They just befriend you. They may befriend you for weeks, months, even up to 3 years, building a relationship with you so that you begin to trust whoever this is. What you're really falling for is a conversation, not with a real human being, but with an AI program designed to ultimately learn about you and find out what your weaknesses are psychologically, and then take advantage of those.
That is such a chilling story. And I'm sure that Matthew Peterson would love if you didn't give away all of the details, because you can go read the current article right now at theblaze.com with more, as we say, coming out next week. But Steve, while we have you here, you are one of the foremost experts, along with Joe Hanneman, on January 6th. So we are now seeing that there are new details coming out about the January 6th pipe bomb that are being revealed. Representative Barry Loudermilk, he is the chair of the new Republican-led Select Subcommittee on J6, and he told our own Glenn Beck yesterday that he isn't buying the narrative that the Biden administration had pushed previously.
The other is mysterious data, or data that has been it's disappeared. And it was when the FBI was doing geofence searches. They went to all the major cell carriers and asked for all the precise data of people who were in that area on January 5th and 6th. Mm-hmm. All the carriers provided information except for one, AT&T. AT&T apparently corrupted the data. Now, no, we kept hearing that the data was corrupted, and this is in my previous investigation. AT&T claimed they didn't corrupt the data. The FBI did. The FBI, we found out later, said no, the data was corrupted when we got it. Now that we get the real information, it becomes even more mysterious. But the bottom line is, the narrative that we were sold on is not even close to what the evidence is bringing up.
So, Steve, break that down, what you just heard there from Representative Loudermilk.
Well, the pipe bomb issue is not only the most confounding, it's the most frustrating of all of the January 6th related issues, because this would crack the case of who planned maybe January 6th if we knew what the source of all of these. And there's so many parts of the pipe bomb story that make no sense to us. In our own investigations through the Blaze, Joe Hanneman and I were able to, through our thousands of hours of video review, we were able to find 3 different United States Capitol Police security cameras, CCTV, pointed at the Democratic National Committee's headquarters where one of these bombs was placed. And those cameras were mysteriously turned away from the investigation scene for no reason. And that is absolutely contrary to what anybody in law enforcement would do or what they would want, because even not only are you taking away the record or hiding the record of the investigation, but you're also taking away the possibility of using those videos nationwide for training videos for the types of people that were in law enforcement that will go into that particular specialty as far as bomb disposal and bomb investigations, things of that nature. And so it made no sense, and all of our experts just were confounded that these cameras would be turned away. That's just one example. Then you get into your specific question here about the data. We know that I sat in the trials, several of these trials in the district courthouse in DC, and listened to FBI agents detail and put images up on the screens inside the courtroom of showing where people were moving through the Capitol building because they were able to track their cell phones, including AT&T customers. And we could literally see them going upstairs. We could see them moving through the rotunda. We could see what offices they might have wandered into, anything like that. And so we know that they had that capability, despite the fact that the cell systems were overwhelmed that day. I couldn't get a signal. I couldn't even get a simple text to leave my phone that day until much later in the afternoon. And so the fact that they were able to produce this much data at the Capitol and where the concentrated crowds were, but they weren't able to produce this data at the DNC or at the RNC, which did not have the super hyper concentrated amount of people trying to use their phones at the time, doesn't make any sense. Then you get into the issue of the corruption claim. So if the data is corrupt, that doesn't mean you then delete the corrupted data from what is supposed to be a day of the biggest attack on our democracy in history, quote unquote. And so it doesn't make any sense that not only that this one spot was corrupted data, so therefore we can't identify who the bomber was, but then all of a sudden to delete it. And you don't want to delete it because corrupted files can be recovered and be made whole again through certain types of forensic analysis and manipulation of that corrupted data.
Well, I well remember the video that you guys found and we put out on YouTube. People can go see those videos of the camera being turned away, and then some of the video of them taking care of the bomb or whatever it was. That was astounding then. But what's really maddening, right, is that someone has to have this information. That's what I'm confused about, right? I mean, there's still footage that we believe the FBI must have, but we haven't seen yet. Is that right?
Yeah, one of the other maddening aspects of this is that when the FBI finally did release to the American public some images of the alleged pipe bomber on the evening of the 5th, there at the DNC, where he sat down on the bench there. I'm glad you have that up right now. You can see. Now look at the frame rate. That right there is about 1 frame per second. Now, that is absolutely absurd. We've had our own video experts look at this and say that there's no way that this particular camera, doesn't matter how old it is, would be operating at such a weak frame rate. That at the very least, the original was probably 10 frames per second, and that somebody manipulated this particular video so that we could not see every action taken. You take a second out of every person's movement like that, you're not going to see everything that they do. They're absolutely convinced that that video has been manipulated, but that's all that the FBI gave us was from that evening after dark on January 5th. So you see where those cameras are. Well, on January 6th, that camera is still operational and it's still pointed in the same place, but the FBI will not let us see what happened on January 6th, because as Loudermilk also explained to Glenn Beck, is that the working theory that the new January 6th select subcommittee has now is that those bombs were actually not even placed at either the RNC or the DNC on the evening of the 5th, but that they had to be placed sometime within the hour of their discovery, on either side of the barricade breaches there at 12:52 p.m. on January 6th.
All right. Well, if the good guys are in charge, somebody has to know something. So people better start talking. We have about 3 or 4 minutes. But Steve, we keep you so busy here at the Blaze. You're also working on an update. We already had a directed energy weapon story come out from you and Joe Hanneman, but I understand that there's also more details coming out from there. We have about 3 or 4 minutes here.
Yeah, we have a part two, and I know everybody's been waiting on that. But the thing that I keep telling our editors is we have to have people stop shooting people. We have to have people stop finding sim farm things that distract Joe and I. And the pipe bomb. I'm not the pipe bomb, but the directed energy weapon story, as well as the things that we're discovering through the video archives that still not been revealed about the less than lethal weapons uses by the Metropolitan Police and Capitol Police. We're getting even more detail on that, and Joe and I are convinced, absolutely authoritatively, that many of these officers, including training officers that train in the use of these less than lethal weapons, were using them not only inappropriately but illegally and outside of their training by aiming some of these dangerous weapons at people's heads. This is one image we chose to do a still because if you drill down on it, it's hard to see. We could actually capture from the video frame rate, much better than at the DNC, the actual rubber bullet that was traveling from one of these officers that hit Joshua Black in the cheek and lodged that bullet in his cheek. Well, they're not supposed to be aiming any of these weapons at people's head. They are trained, not whether it's rubber bullets, whether it's pepper balls, or whether it is canisters of tear gas or other types of munitions like flashbangs, as they're called. None of these are supposed to be aimed at their heads. They're supposed to be aimed at feet, or at the very least, some of these at their torso. And yet these officers from an elevated position were not only hitting multiple protesters, not on the front line, they were firing it deeper into the crowd and actually hitting people and damaging and hurting people. Lots of injuries were caused, but they were also hitting their own officers down in the police line in the back of the head. And had they not had helmets on, surely somebody would have been seriously hurt. And in fact, there are numerous examples in law enforcement training of people who have been killed by these less than lethal weapons because they were hit in the head.
Well, we do keep you busy, Steve, and we are grateful for this story and so much more. Incredible stuff, and can't wait to talk more about all of this next week.
Yeah, everybody needs to go out there and follow Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman on X. They're not bots. They're going to be telling you the real story that's going on.
Jill, Matt, thank you so much for having me today.
All right. Well, we'll definitely stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more in terms of that. And Steve's busier than even just these stories that we've gone over right now. So stay tuned. There'll be more. We'll come back and wrap up the show right after this. Yeah, we went around the horn today. There's a ton that Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman and everybody else at the Blaze investigative team have been covering. So it's good every now and then, Matt, to just go back and catch up because day to day, it's difficult to even just keep up with all of the stories that are going on. You're the editor-in-chief. You have to keep up with this. You have to make sure that all these stories are getting pushed out. But it's great to have a team that is this good and breaking stories like this, because this is nationally important and national security is at risk here.
Yes, and I mean, last week, Steve broke the story about how many plainclothes agents, how many FBI agents were there, most of them doing nothing, but some of them doing we don't know what.
274.
And that drove the discussion through the weekend, and it's interesting. We have this Friday cycle now where this article coming out with more on Monday or Tuesday is also going to help drive this conversation throughout the country this weekend, because people, have not reported how this actually occurred. And to the extent that people have reported on it, they haven't said enough, because you really have China with, not boots on the ground, but the equivalent of server farms on the ground with the SIM cards. And the amount of damage that's being done here is unbelievable. And I'm just as concerned about the psychological aspects and the story that's going to come out Monday or Tuesday as I am about the critical infrastructure. The infrastructure threat is real, but I don't think China is ready to press the nuclear button there yet. That's clearly a test. I mean, it's dangerous. It should be terrifying. It's something we obviously have to deal with. But what's been going on for a long time in public is the grooming of young people, especially in America, through these bots that are all over the internet, and that is something that we need to talk about a lot more. So kudos to Steve and Joe, and hopefully in the coming week there'll be a lot more discussion about this.
Yeah, and the article that's currently out at theblaze.com, the things that stick out to me are the fact that his sources, Steve Baker's sources, say that this is an act of war right now with these current SIM farms, and that the only thing worse than this is the threat of thermonuclear war. And when you start going up and saying levels of wording like that, you know that these people are taking this incredibly seriously, which they should. But also on the same coin there, on the flip side, they've been here, they believe, since 2004.
Yep.
And we're only now figuring this out. So we have a long ways to go.
Yeah, and the fact that we only figured it out because, senior administration official was targeted, I mean, that's great, but it's a little concerning that people have been asleep at the wheel this long, especially in the previous administration. And there's this attitude that's been prevalent in Washington, D.C. for a long time that China doesn't count when it comes to corruption, that everyone gets a little Chinese money, including the Biden family, right? And that's supposed to be A-OK. The NBA makes money from China. The studios make money from China. Billionaires like Mike Bloomberg make lots of money from China. And that's okay. It's fine. It's not going to corrupt anything. And the truth of the matter is we've just normalized the corruption, and China has embedded itself here in a variety of different ways. And the United States, in many ways, is like this, big, fat carcass that everyone's just devouring, cannibalizing from around the world, and that has to change. And this sort of story is one of those moments when you see the administration stepping up and going out there and starting to get rid of these things and spreading the word about it. Because if we don't change, I mean, we will just be eaten alive from within, and that's what's been happening for decades until Trump came along.
Yeah, and the clock is ticking, though, on Donald Trump right now.
Oh, yeah.
I know that he just got in office, but this is the way that things work in Washington, D.C., and we need to start fixing these very large systemic problems right now. We don't care here at The Blaze if you have an R or a D next to your name. We want to see the problems being fixed and being resolved, because this is incredibly serious for this point where we are at right now with the country.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is not about party. This is about national security. And it goes to the importance of investigative journalism, right? Which is why we need your support. You can't do this. Steve has to go on the road a lot. The guy works like crazy. And this kind of stuff takes time, right? It takes time to develop relationships. It takes time to, to really vet the stories. And we need, 5 more Steve Bakers here. We need to go nonstop with investigative journalism. That's the thing I'm most excited about when it comes to the news side of things. And there's just a ton more that we could do, but you need the resources, and that's the tough thing about it. So we do a lot with a little, and we'll continue to do more. But the sky's the limit. It's just like, you give me the dollars, like we'll convert it into real stories, very quickly. And that's what this is about now. It's about building the media we need, because for damn sure that the legacy media does not care, does not have your best interests in mind. They're a propaganda factory, and we're the people who are out there going after, Republicans like Corey Mills if they're corrupt, as well as the Chinese.
I had no plans of becoming investigative journalist on Matt's team, and yet it happens to be 1 year ago today that I was on the helicopter. Now, the infamous helicopter ride with Glenn Beck, Corey Mills, and myself, where Representative Mills told me that he was completely single. There was absolutely no one in his life, and he was very lonely. Now, we didn't figure it out until March, or I should say February, that he was lying about all of that. March is when I found the marriage certificate, and the rest of it. Now, if you watch this show, you already know, but it's the 1 year anniversary. Investigative journalism. It's important, Matt.
It's in the air here. It just happens to you whether you want to do it or not,
It's one of those things. Blaze Media. It's what they do the best. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here on Monday.